Yeah, like I said, you can talk to everything.
What's that?
So low bolts come out first, then the cover, and now where do you go from here? What do we have to do next? Stub shafts next?
Stub shafts have to come out next, yeah.
Okay.
And then we start disassembling from there.
Fuck, I hope
Yeah, we'll take the main caps off first.
Why the fuck is your Wi-Fi?
These older caps are kind of nice because they actually have arrows pointing out. But what I always do is I mark them. So I'll
Just like a main cap? Sorry, I mean.
Yeah, I always mark them that way. If I can't possibly get them screwed up, use this. I'll put a number 1 right here on the case, so that it's here.
Okay.
And then I'll also put it on the actual cap.
Cap itself?
Yeah.
Or you drop it on the ground. See, guys, he's pretending right now.
Or I just put it on the ground. At least it still works. But that way, you can't possibly screw them up.
What you tell me with a good time?
Unless you're blind.
Nice bit of gear oil first thing in the morning.
Yeah. It's gonna smell lovely the
At
rest
least
of
it's
the
not
day.
gear oil.
Gonna smell lovely the rest of the day in here.
No matter what you do, I didn't get on my skin. You still just the odor just leaches into your skin.
It absolutely does. I like to look at stuff.
With the cheapo LSD, which I didn't realize until after.
No, they're good. I use it in my race car.
Really? I thought you had the lifetime guarantee one. That's not the lifetime guarantee
Oh,
one.
I've got the Eaton True Track.
Yeah, that's. I don't think that's what that is. It should tell
It
you.
looks
right.
like it is.
Is it?
Yeah, it's got the same plug, same everything.
I thought the Wave Track was the one that was the good one.
Everyone's got an opinion, right?
Okay.
I don't. Until mine breaks, mine will be good enough for me.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
And knock on wood, right? Because it could break, but you know, they all could break. Mine's the same type. These are a helical gear type.
Yeah, that's
all
one,
mechanical, no clutch packs.
which I do like that because everyone said about, oh, what about, isn't the 88 going to be more clunky? Honestly, it got better because I went back to a helical style like factory Torson's were. Clutch pack ones, man, those things the whirring noise gets old on the highway.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
I do like this setup though, the arm and stuff that holds it. Does everyone have that?
No, not everyone. Now we got the caps off. We'll take the diff out.
I had no idea the pollen was that bad. You pulled it out?
Yeah. I already.
Oh, no, damn, see?
I pulled it out already once with it recording. So actually there's a couple of fun ways we could try to pop the seal out. Yeah, sometimes this works.
Oh, there you go.
Sometimes you literally just have to finesse it. There it is. Trash.
Junk.
Get a new one. This is a very important part right here. Very important part.
Why? What's so important about that? Seriously?
Yeah, it's the oil slinger. It helps it sits right here and helps keep oil slung around the bearing.
Okay.
And keeps it more or less from slinging oil as much into the seal.
Okay.
So less likely to leak, and it's sort of, you can see how it sits on top of the bearing like this. So as oil comes through, it has to pass, you know, the oil slinger kind of like...
Okay, so recirculates it through.
Yeah, kind of keeps it back through the bearing.
Gotcha.
So it's a very important part.
Does that not even come in like a kit or anything? Like you have to keep that?
Normally it doesn't come in the kit. Most kits, I don't know if there are any kits that come with it, but most kits don't come with the oil slinger.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't lose the oil slinger if you're trying to rebuild the Diff.
Yeah, note to self. Don't do that.
No, but it's not a big deal because you just buy one. You know, you can just order one. They're not like expensive, but just make sure you put it in.
That's about
Part of what you gotta do.
God damn, that shit's no joke. There it is. Give that perfect sound.
You can actually feel it move through the punch.
Really?
Yeah. I can feel when I'm moving it.
Nice.
It's got cutouts in the case for you to fit it down into. You can see them right here and right here. And on this, so it's got cutouts here, 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 here. It's designed for you to be able to knock them in and out.
That's perfect. Yeah. And now what about these side bearings or the in and out, or what the fuck you call it?
Yeah, so those are pretty easy as well, especially if you have a bearing race installer remover.
Okay.
They just come right out. Yeah, we'll pop them. We'll knock them out. We'll take the seals out, and then they'll come right out as well. They're different than the normal axle seals.
Why?
The normal axle seals have a flange on them. See, like this? Like on the Explorer case and most IRS differentials, they have a flange on them, so you knock them on. These ones don't have a flange. That's like on the outside of the case, so you don't have. It's okay. It's still pretty easy to remove them, but. Come on, baby. I'm gonna see if I can do it this way. You know why? I like to make it hard.
She said.
I like to make it extra difficult.
Pictures to my wife. There it was. Okay, Alex, while you're taking everything out here, why a Ford gear or any, why not like a Summit Racing gear? Like for one, we know these are cheaper, but why a Ford gear over anyone else? For the most part, when it comes to these 8.8 or even a 9-inch.
The main reason we always recommend a Ford gear is because they are the quietest. They're literally made at Ford's gear plant, and they meet the exact same. They're literally basically an OEM gear set for a Ford 8.8. So. They're designed to be strong, but they're also designed to be quiet, and that's probably the #1 reason.
So that was the next thing I asked. Do you know if they're actually stronger? Do they say they're stronger, or are they the same cast? Because that's the next thing I know I'm going to be asked. Like, are they any better? They say performance, but what makes it performance? Is it just different gear ratios? Because I guess I don't even know that either. I never even looked into it.
What makes it Ford Performance, it's their Ford Performance division that sells them, and you can order them as a ring and pinion kit. Comes with a crush sleeve and the pinion nut, but you can order them as a kit for the aftermarket. It's basically Ford's aftermarket division. So like if you went to a Ford dealer and you just were like, hey, I got a diff out of an '08 Ford Explorer, I need a ring and pinion gear, they would look it up and they'd say, okay, this is what we can give you. It's a 355 from the factory. This is the gear you get.
Sure.
And you'd be like, no, I want a 410, and they'd be like, there's no lookup for a 410 for that. That vehicle didn't come with a 410.
Sure.
I'm sorry. So the Ford Performance Parts division is Ford's aftermarket offerings. So this is where you can just order any gear set you want as long as you know what it goes, what you're trying to put in, which is in this case a 488. It's pretty simple. As far as being stronger, no, they're the same gears. To my knowledge, I've never, even back when in my days working at a Ford dealership or putting gears in a Mustang or anything like that, I've never heard or had any issues with the Ford gears. I don't know anybody who's breaking Ford gears. To me, they're as strong or stronger than anything else out there. If somebody has better experience with that and is breaking gears, then my initial thought's going to be, well, I don't think your diff is set up right.
Okay. Because my next question was going to be to you, is you just spoke about earlier, Turtle Power, the race car has an 8.8 in it, correct? This doesn't have a 9-inch in it, and that car makes a buku power. I mean, the power it's making, I mean, it's on a drag racer, so it's not on a bias ply, so I mean, it's taking as much shock as you can. Now, it is an auto, but that car's taking some serious shock to that diff.
Yeah, so the diff that I build for all my customers is the same diff I use in Turtle Power, exact same. Typically we're using an Explorer aluminum case with the Grannas load bolt setup with the cap with the load bolts, and mine is no different. Okay. Just standard Ford gears, standard rebuild kit. I don't do anything different on mine than I do with anybody's. The car's goes pretty consistently. It's gone in the low 260 foots on the. And at World Cup it did a 119 60 foot.
So it's scooting.
Yeah, it can launch. It can go wheels up, and I have yet to find the limitation of these gears. And I really think that it all comes down to two things: setting up the diff correctly with the right backlash and the right gear contact pattern, and then the load bolts. That's part of the Joel Grannas kit are really the magic sauce, because that's
what I wanted to ask. And I was going to say, can you explain? Because people are like, "What's the load bolt?" Like, and let's show that here so people can kind of explain, because no one else does this except Joel, and I think that's what makes the 8.8 last longer, like almost a 9-inch, because of those.
So this is an iron case. This is a Thunderbolt case, so it's probably a little less important on this case than it is on an Explorer case. But these caps hold down on the differential carrier bearings, and there's shims on either side that set basically the gear mesh, if you want to think about it like that, the backlash between the gears. And if these caps deflect, every time you launch the car, every time you put heavy load against it, the pinion gear is trying to climb the ring gear, and so it's putting a good amount of sideward deflection against the ring gear, trying to push the ring gear away from it. They're trying to push away from each other. And these caps' job and the case's job is to keep everything in alignment and drive that power out through the axles and not deflect inside the actual differential assembly itself. And what happens is when you start making more and more power, you get more and more deflection. And that deflection turns into catastrophic failure unless you find a way to mitigate it. Because as soon as the ring gear comes out of mesh with the pinion gear, you're going to run into an issue where the gear contact pattern is less and less and less. They're not touching each other as much, and that's when you break a gear. Okay. So what we do is we use these load bolts
I was going to say, flip it back over so they can see it on the come this way a little bit more. Right there. So now explain it if you want to
Yeah.
do this.
So these are the load bolts that you tighten down from this side, and when installed, they're putting pressure down against the cap. Not a lot of pressure. You literally put them on to like 10 foot-pounds or hand tight.
Yeah.
That's it. No, nothing more than that. Their job is not to cause opposite deflection against the cap. Their job is to literally help the cap hold shape and limit deflection inside the differential assembly.
Pretty much act without having, almost like we were thinking about for you're building an engine, right? And we're taking for a crank, we get billet caps for that. This is kind of a way of doing it, or almost adding like a cradle, like you would think of like an RB or aftermarket where they put a cradle to keep the caps together. This is a sense doing that.
Yes.
A little bit different, obviously it's not tying them all together, but it's putting that pressure to keep them from deflecting.
And it's less expensive than doing billet caps.
Sure.
Billet caps are not
You gotta
only
machine it, you gotta do all that.
they all require finish machining. So if you look at Strange's website or any of the other manufacturers for 8/8 billet caps, you'll see that yes, they're available, and they're not even hateful on the price of the actual cap.
It's the machine time.
It's the machining that's required to get it to install properly and have the right amount of basically grab the bearing properly and sit flush in the case. That's where all the cost comes in, and most people aren't equipped to do that. They don't have a way to mill the caps down properly, and so the load bolts are an absolutely easy thing that most people can install. I mean, Joel's video clearly shows
you
it, what to do. There's no secret here. It just works. And I think again, if you have the load bolts installed properly, I would say, from my experience, based off the mile an hour that my car does in the quarter mile, the car makes between 13 and 1400, about 1350, 1360 based on the mile an hour and weight of the car. You aren't going to have a problem. Now, I'm not going to say at 2,000 horsepower you still aren't going to break something.
Sure.
You know, but there's a reason why cars in that range use a Ford 9-inch and they don't use a Ford 8.8 because they're just going to a stronger setup. In my opinion, if you can't make it work right with the load bolts, you probably need to move to a 9-inch.
Okay.
If you're going to ask me to build you the ultimate differential that you can go, 1.0 or 0.9 60 foots on the car, like you're going to go to a 9-inch. Like go to a DSS 9-inch kit or something like that. For most of my customers, most street cars, and most race cars with weekend warrior cars that are out there racing in street car classes, the 8.8 is going to do its job. What
was your best time?
My car went at 821 at 172.
Yeah, I mean that.
Which was the first time out.
I mean, that is so fast. I don't think people understand, because that's like going from 0 in a quarter mile. I mean, 172, it's not like you're rolling and go up to, I mean, that is moving. So that gives you good perspective of how much of a beating they can take.
Yeah, the car goes low 5s in the 8th.
Yeah, so.
And, if I get the short track down a little bit more, it would be in the 7s already. I mean, at mile an hour is enough to go in the 7s.
Yeah.
It's really the short track, and when we had the car at World Cup, it was on new turbo setup, so we never really got to do any testing with it. It was literally get the turbo setup in the car, run it on the dyno, touch up the tune, put it on the trailer, and bring it to World Cup.
Obviously there's more in it, and we'll talk about that more when we get over, so you guys can see the car here.
Yeah.
But it just shows you how strong this is.
This isn't. We don't need this to be any fancy torque.
That's what I grab 9 times out of 10. I have a digital one, but I have one that's preset for my lug nuts and stuff.
Yeah.
And I just grab it because I don't have to take it down or make sure it gets checked. That plus or minus 2% on lug nuts doesn't matter.
No. It does not.
Now, Alex, what are you torquing these to?
These are going to 90 foot-pounds.
With red Loctite, we put on it there and seated it first, correct?
Yeah, I always seat the gear first, draw the gear all the way up in it, you can press the gear on. You just have to make sure you press it on with the bolt holes lined up perfectly, which is kind of hard to do. So sometimes you start a couple of bolts and then you press the gear on, or if you can go in like a back and forth star pattern, usually you can pull the gear all the way on.
Sure.
Yeah.
One thing I want to mention to you, you just told me, which you never would know that, but in the Ford book, it tells you to use a vise to do this. So if someone says like, oh, that doesn't seem like a good way to be clamping this, that's how Ford tells you to do it. All right, so Alex has started reassembly now, and what he is doing is taking the race off.
See you, bud.
Right?
Yeah, we're going to take the carrier bearings off of your LSD.
Okay.
So there's a couple ways to accomplish this. If you happen to have a housing that actually has like machined grooves in it to fit a puller, you can use a regular standard like 2-jaw puller or 3-jaw puller setup. But most of these housings don't, especially the LSD housings. So this being an Eaton True Track does not. So you're going to use a special tool to remove it. Otherwise, you will literally be using a combination of things with a bearing splitter and everything else. If you have the right special tool, then it makes removal of these bearings super, super easy. And I'll show you guys how the special tool works real quick and show you why maybe you should bring it to somebody with one.
Yeah. So let's take a look at this here.
It's got different size arbors that go in so that you can remove bearings of different sizes, and clamshells that go around and grabs the bearing. Okay, tighten that bad boy down. So now it's clamped around the bearing, and then you're literally going to use this forcing screw to pull against it, which is going to pull against the housing, push against that arbor we installed, and then you'll just use the impact gun, or if you wanted to, you could clamp this into a vise and whatever. Again, you're removing an old bearing, so you don't really care about using the bearing. You just want to get it off cleanly and without damaging the carrier itself.
Sure.
So an impact gun here. And that's it.
That's pretty awesome.
Yep.
So you go.
Take the tool out. And then loosen that up. Take that back off. Separate the clamshell. There's a bearing.
Shit, that was fast. Thanks, man. Okay, Alex is now setting up. What's the next tool now? What is this you got in your hand?
This tool is used to properly set up pinion depth in the case. So it consists of a big gauge block tube and the actual gauge block itself that you're going to measure using shims as feelers to see what is the correct shim to properly space the pinion gear in the housing.
Okay.
So after you install the new races, the inner and outer pinion bearing race in the case, then you're going to use your new bearing with the tool. You install the new bearing onto the tool, and then you basically install it into the case, and like so. And then you've got this handle, and then you grab the other bearing, which is over here. Install this and tighten it down to 20 inch-pounds to simulate a small load against the bearings and make sure that everything is installed. Another thing worth noting, I've already pre-installed the bearing races here inside, but if you look down in there, inside the case, you can see that the races are flush inside the case. And the way I know that they're flush is because I go around with my feeler gauge and I actually make sure that they're flush. So this is a 2000s feeler gauge, and it will not fit inside, underneath the race.
Okay.
It's important that these races are all the way seated, fully flush. So if anyone's going to use this in any sort of DIY capacity, it's really important that you make sure that when you knock those races in, they are fully in flush inside the case. Okay. Otherwise, all of this is for nothing, because when you set up the pinion, you're going to be setting it off of incorrect measurements because your races weren't even put all the way
See,
in.
that's good information to have because I would have screwed that up for sure. I would have forgot it. More looby lube.
Just a little. You don't want to put a ton on them. I usually wipe it on there and then I just like literally wipe it back off most of it. You don't want it to be any layer of oil that would actually be of any thickness that would affect your measurements. You just want it to not
bind up,
hurt the bearings. Most bearings come with a really light layer of machining oil on them, but sometimes you pull them out and depending on how long it's been sitting or how they were packaged, they may not anymore. If you don't feel like they have any oil on them, if they feel bone dry, put a little bit of oil on it, move them around, and then wipe it back off, just so that there's just the thinnest amount of oil on them possible, so that when you're setting it up, you don't accidentally screw anything up. So this bearing goes on here like so, and then you're gonna install that into the special tool,
which is
right there. Yep. All right. And then we're going to torque. We're going to set this. We're going to tighten it by hand until it's at 20 inch-pounds of rotating torque.
Okay.
That makes sure that you're simulating the preload on the bearings. Again, they're tapered roller bearings, so when you're setting this up, you actually want to use a spec for how much preload is against these tapered roller bearings. That way, you're compressing them just like they would be at final installation. That way you get the correct measurement.
So how many inch-pounds do you say that is?
20 inch-pounds.
20 inch-pounds.
Checking it, we're almost there. There we are, 20 inch-pounds of rotating torque.
Perfect.
All right, so next we're going to install the gauge block itself. It's just a round tube, but it basically simulates the center of the carrier. So it's used in conjunction with the other special tool to properly set pinion depth. So you'll install it in here. You'll make sure there's no contact. That way you know that you're good. There is not. And then we're going to install the caps and torque them just like normal. And we'll come back and we'll actually measure with the shims what's the correct pinion shim to use.
Okay. All right, so what's up next?
Up next, we have the bearing caps torqued, the tools properly installed to 20 inch-pounds of rotating torque to simulate bearing preload. And then we're going to stick the shims in between there and stack up the shims, try different thicknesses until you basically have a slight drag in between them, just like you're shimming a cylinder head, a 2JZ cylinder head, and you're checking with feeler gauges. You're using these pinion shims like a feeler gauge, and when you have the slight drag, that's the right one, that's the right stack up. If it doesn't fit in there and it's too tight, it's too tight. If it slides in and out super loose, it's too loose. It needs to have just a slight amount of drag on it.
You're just trying to find the perfect guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tool room. It was way nicer.
Press it in for me. Come on, press it in.
Oh, we're pressing.
Close.
And we're back.
And we're back. Channel 5 News at 10.
All right, so we pressed the gear with the shims that we just measured for underneath the gear to set proper pinion depth in the case. The next step after pressing the gear on, which we use the shop press to do, is we're going to install this bad boy. That's your crush sleeve. The crush sleeve sets the pinion bearing preload. So as you tighten the nut down, you've got both bearings like this inside the case getting pushed together, and this preload keeps these bearings happy. You too tight, you ruin the bearing. Too loose, you again ruin the bearing. It's like
it's very tricky.
Well, yeah, you not only ruin the bearing, but too loose, and you know, if you're really loose, the actual gear is moving inside the housing, which is absolutely unacceptable. So,
unacceptable.
So that's where you break stuff.
Ron Burgundy does not approve.
This is an important step. Always make sure you've got that installed, and then when you put it together, you're going to stick the pinion in there. Then we're going to put the bearing in its place, and then we kind of have to add some more stuff. We have to put the oil slinger in there on top, and then we're going to tighten that down and set bearing preload, and I'll show you guys how that's done.
All right. Important step, guys. Make sure you have something underneath here, because God forbid you drop this, you could really F things up.
Yes.
So we're using a trash can with a little catch pan here, but you have to hold it from underneath.
Yep.
And now, bearing.
Bearing. The bearing.
The bearing.
This.
What is that called again?
That's called the oil slinger. So
you were talking about this earlier. How I don't think we got that. I'm not sure if we got that on camera, but it's very vital. You were telling me.
Yeah, and I'm sort of just stacking this up so you guys can see how it is, because in reality, we're gonna set this bearing in here first. Then we're gonna set the oil slinger in here, which sits on top of the bearing, and kind of this is what the flange actually pushes against. So the flange actually pushes against the oil slinger,
okay.
And basically the oil slinger sits on top of the bearing, and any gear lube that comes through the bearing basically hits this oil slinger and goes back through the bearing, kind of keeps some of it away from the pinion seal, but also kind of make sure that the bearing, which is way back here in the case, away from the main guts,
yep.
is always properly lubricated. So
make sure you use your lube, guys.
It's a pinion bearing seal installer. A lot of them are discontinued. I don't even know if you can buy this tool anymore. It's got magnets in it. It's really nice. And it's nice for on-car too, because once the end of the pinion gear is out, like once you flange, you have to be able to go around it. So a lot of people are just going to be tippy-tapping with a hammer all day long, and I prefer to use this in all instances, and it will push it on really nice for you.
Sweet. This doesn't look like a lot of fun, Alex. I feel like you're kind of lying to me right now.
It's a lot of fun, Ryan. You know, it starts out like this, and it doesn't get any better. Yep. But basically, you're just going to keep doing what I'm doing right now in a very, non-cursing way. And you're just going to be tightening these together, because what you have to do is crush that sleeve.
Yep.
And periodically, after you make some tightening, you come over here, see how much slop is still left in it. Once there's zero slop, you don't have that much further to go. But the goal is get zero slop, then you have to make really small moves and keep checking it for the...
So there's no official torque rating for this, or...?
There is, yeah. So the official torque rating is 11 to 29 inch-pounds of turning torque. That's bearing preload.
Yep.
So you will tighten this nut until you get to 11 to 29 inch-pounds.
And again, that's rotating. Guys, it's not a click, it's a continual. That's what I'm looking for here.
So you need the right beam style or dial style, sorry, it's a dial style torque wrench to set this. So we're gonna just keep doing it until we get to the point where there's zero slop, and then I'll show you guys how I'm gonna check the bearing preload.
One other thing I wanted to put in this, I didn't realize, and I know he's told me before, but used to be a Ford tech, and you went to what did you say it was, differential training, right?
Yeah, Ford's differential school training, yeah.
So it gives you a little bit more. It's not just like something you read about or you're doing it by the book. It's literally by the book, as they literally sat you down, went through, like, this is how you need to do it. And that's why you have these tools.
Every single time, and not only do I use all the correct special tools, but I also have the workshop manual up on my computer.
Right, that's where you keep double checking, because we want this literally to be as perfect as it can be, within reason.
It's the way I do it every single time, because even though I have a pretty good memory, I always like to double check myself. If I have any question, like, I might know the backlash should be 8 to 12 thousandths, but I'm OCD just to the point where I need to go double check the spec book. I just want to make sure I'm right. it's just the right way to do it, and I want it to be right every single time. So
Good
that's the way
job.
I do it.
I'm just so proud of you, Alex. I really am.
Shut up. The actual Ford tool for this, just so no one flames in the comments, is a piece of flat iron that bolts down using these bolts into this flange, and then it actually has a half-inch drive square slot in it for you to put a breaker bar on it. So what I'm using here is my 3-foot pry bar with the same bolts that would be bolting that thing down anyway. Yes, it's not the Ford special tool. I just find this is easier to use, and I don't have to buy a piece of flat iron that costs $300. So
watch, guys. This is what he's got to do. This is just wild to me.
So we're already in the range. We just checked it, and we were at, I think, 12 or so inch-pounds of preload. So we're just going to go a little bit more, and I'm just going to basically squeeze these together, right like that, and then we're going to check it again, because I really want it to be like in the 20 to 22 range would be optimal, because we have new bearings in it. So spec is 11 to 29. You want to be in the top 50% with new bearings. If you're using old bearings, you would go in the lower 50%, because they're not going to wear in, but new bearings are going to wear in. Okay. So we'll check it from here and see what we're at.
Let's see if we can get this. So as you go in.
Yeah, baby.
So what's it showing?
25.
You're at 25?
Yeah, so if you want to watch it.
Yep, go ahead and spin it. There you go, guys. Sweet.
Yep, about 25 inch-pounds of turning torque, right in the range, 24, 25. Perfectly in the range of 11 to 29, and a little bit on the tighter side of the spec because we got new bearings. All right, so setting up Backlash, we got the shims correctly in it to move the diff back and forth, set up the gear mesh between the two, and set the proper backlash. We've torqued the caps down. So we're just going to show you, this is how you measure backlash. It's an important step. Right now you can see the indicators on 0, 10, 0, 10. So that's 10 thousandths of backlash.
Which it was 8 to 12, so literally it's as perfect as perfect can get.
Right in the middle of spec. That's going to keep it from making any weird clunking sounds when you put it in forward or reverse coming from the diff. It's also literally setting the mesh of the gear. So how much they actually mesh into each other, the ring and pinion gear, which is extremely important. So once you've added the correct amount of shims after that point to add some bearing preload, the only step left is to use gear marking compound, spin a pattern on the diff, and see what it looks like.
Okay.
All right.
We're down to the last nitty-gritty part here.
So we've painted a couple of teeth on the gear here. You can see we painted the back and the front side of the gear.
Okay.
And then we're going to just spin it over a few revolutions forward and reverse. And then we're just going to see, what does it do? How does it do?
How does it do? It's going to take a little minute.
It does, yeah. You can see right where the pinion...
Oh, I'm going to have to get it this way or it's not focusing. But go ahead and talk.
You can see right where the pinion is meshing with the ring gear.
Yep.
So you can see there's a boundary at the edges and a boundary at the inside. So on both sides, on both of the edges, you can see where the paint is away. So you can see that the main point of contact between the gears is right in the center of the gear.
Cool.
Which is the most important thing.
It's important. And no, yeah, that's great. All right, guys, what's going on? What's cracking? Working on the 8.8 today. This video brought to you by Grannas Racing. He sent me his new 8.8 cover. Now, if you guys already have an 8.8, this will bolt right up. You don't have to change this brace, but this allows for a couple things. So let's get into it here. So here's the old one with the old bracing system. And we'll show it side by side so we can give that look to it here. Oops, which the bolt fell off that I had on top there because I'm a ding-dong. But the big thing with this is we're supposed to, in theory, not need a catch can anymore. Now, I'm going to test that theory out here, see if it doesn't need it, but it might need something to breathe. Might have to go with a cap style for this. The biggest thing is, though, it allows for more fluid capacity. So instead of the 1.7 liters, this will now take the full 2 liters. So you're putting that in there, not 2 liters, I think 2 quarts, good Lord, Ryan, 2 quarts. Used to put 1.7 quarts in, now you're just gonna put 2 quarts in. Makes it easy so you can just dump it in, don't have to worry about getting the level perfect, because again, we had a problem with a little bit of fluid building up. Now this causes too a nice proper back to it, so it's more curved inside of here, where this really was cutting in, like it just only had so much room. If you look from back to back, which I'll show you here, this just has way more fluid capacity and should allow it to breathe a little bit better. The other thing is, if you're going to drain it or anything, or fill it with fluid, you have access to it a lot easier. Pretty much was impossible here, and if you drain fluid out, it went over everything. Where now it's angled, as you can see, angled out of there, and there's no brace in the way. So the physical casting itself is built into it. And just like just like this one here, take this off. This has load bolts. Now I need to take these bolts out here to put in the load bolts, which I have right here. This allows and braces these guys right here and here. What that does is keeps that from deflecting. Think of main caps on your engine, right? You know how we go to billet. This is allowing those to stay a little sturdy. Now, I do have the T-Bird cast iron, which is supposed to be a good bit stronger than the aluminum cases, but this then on top of it keeps these from deflecting. So it should really be just as strong as most of the big boy diffs out there. Like it should be darn close to a 9-inch now within reason. Just like any diff, shock is your enemy. I don't care if you got a 9-inch, I don't care what diff you have, it doesn't like that crazy shock, doesn't like wheel hop, things of that nature. So anything we do to prevent that, to keep it living longer, we're going to do so. So we have these load bolts here that need to go in, but this cover is much deeper, much more room. You can see how much is like cut out of it almost. So if we flip it over, you can see like it really gets shallow on this side. Here's where the breather part was. Now let's flip this one over. So side by side, look how much more depth there is in this. I mean, it's wild. This is more uniform depth on top of it. As you can see, this side had some, but then it got super shallow, where this doesn't have that. On top of it goes much deeper on the top. This is also going to allow this kit per se, this diff cover, to be more universal for him to use in RX-7, other vehicles. So we don't have to do these crazy cages. He'll just change out that good Lord, 4-bolt pattern on the back side of this, and that changes out, and that allows him to make whatever he needs for, say, an RX-7, for a 300ZX, so on and so forth, which is pretty cool. Again, this is where your load bolts go. I'm going to need to put those in here. They feed from the back side, and then you use a nut on them to tighten it up, and you'll use some gasket maker here. You want to make sure you use it for gear oil. Other stuff will eat through it. The gear oil will eat through like regular RTV. You've seen it happen, so make sure you do that. Again, I'll show that in this video. Another thing is, this is a little bit thinner here because we had this bracing it. This is now thicker. You can see it here. So it does come with new bolts. So these bolts are slightly, ever so slightly longer. So if I get these here, this is the old ones. It's just ever so slightly longer. So got it back in. You guys see my old videos, which I'll link down below, how to install this and do everything. I'm not going to be redundant. But the big thing is here, the fact that it doesn't have the bracing where you can see everything. I think it looks like an actual diff now. The caging I never really liked. I don't know. Even though it's underneath the car, I just think this looks nicer. But you got your drain plug right here. Now it's still pretty hard to get to the fill just for the fact it's here. I'm curious if they can move it instead of it being here, but I guess I'd be in the way of the load bolts. If they can move it to the side so like you could fill and drain it without having to take the diff out. Again, not the end of the world, because let's be honest, you don't really take the diff out that much or have to drain the diff fluid out. For something like this performance application, if it's needs drained, you're probably already taking the diff out. So again, not the end of the world, just something I'm making aware, but yeah, really, really happy with that. Just remember though, another thing you need to do is you will have to shim this. So in my previous videos, I go over this. You want to make sure you have enough shims in here to get the pinion angle right, because if not, it wears on the pinion on side of here, and it also is harder on your drive shaft. So just something to be aware of. All right, guys, so back at the house now. Got the diff in, got to drive it yesterday to turn 14, and big difference. So the car definitely livened up a good bit. 6th gear can be used. At about 85, almost 90, it hits 3,000 RPM now in 6, which is perfect. We got a little 3-liter. The part of me was like, man, I wish I had longer gear. But I'm like, in my head, I'm like, dude, that is insane. Like, I don't need any more. So if you're cruising about 80, it's tacking. I looked it up via GPS, and then using my
using the digital tachometer on the BTI so I can see exactly at like 80 miles an hour, it's tacking like 2650, 2700 RPM. Like, yeah, so the 373 was just too long. You guys need a 410 gear. If you have even taller tires, it would be even worse. So this is a 26.5-inch tall tire. It's a 305, 35, 18. So anything more than that, guys, you just get a 410. Just get a 410 gear and be done. You're not going to want anything else. Unless you're doing some roll racing maybe and wanting some extremely long gears, so you only have to shift, you know, you don't have to ever go to fifth and you only have to use that 1, 2, 3, 4. But again, that's up to you. But if you're a street car, use a 410. Again, I want to give a big shout out to Alex at Absolute Driven Performance. Thank you again, buddy. He was more than kind to help me out with all this. If you guys, again, check it out down below. Shoot him a message on Instagram or Facebook. He's always open and available, and he's more than knowledgeable. Again, thank you guys all so much, and have a great day. Peace!